I get it, there's a ton of glossy photos of wine coolers on Amazon, all promising perfect temperature control and restaurant-grade storage, but when you finally slot the fridge into your kitchen or home bar, it just sounds like a loud hum, takes forever to chill a single bottle, or ends up taking more space than you thought. That moment when you realize the sleek unit you imagined will sit quietly under your counter is actually a noisy, cramped eyesore is what makes me pause before any big appliance purchase. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Today I'm diving into the Yeego 24-inch dual-zone wine and beverage refrigerator so you can decide whether it's the kind of nori grits edition you've been looking for, or another piece of equipment you'll end up storing in the attic. First off, let's talk about why people buy a dual-zone cooler in the first place. Most home entertainers want two things: a place to keep red wines at a slightly warmer 55-58 F, and a spot to have whites, Ross, or even craft beers at a cooler 38-45 F. The idea is you don't have to juggle a separate mini fridge for beer and a wine rack for reds, and you avoid the nightmare of a single-zone unit that forces you to compromise on one side. The market is saturated with models that claim dual-zone but often hide the trade-off in a small interior footprint or a temperature range that drifts when you open the door. That's why I zeroed in on a few practical questions before I even clicked Add to Cart. How many bottles or cans does the unit really hold? Is the compressor quiet enough for an open-plan living space? Can it actually sit under a standard 24-inch countertop without wobbling? And finally, does the price reflect the convenience of having both zones in a single appliance? The Yeego 24-inch cooler checks a lot of those boxes on paper. It promises space for at least 20 standard 750 milliliters wine bottles and up to 60 cans, which translates to roughly 3 rows of bottles plus a front rack for cans or small bottles. In real-world terms, that means a small family or a weekend host can keep a modest selection of reds, a few whites, and a pack of craft beers all in one place, without having to shuffle bottles between a pantry and a fridge. I measured the interior with a few of my own bottles, a mix of 750 milliliters Cabernet, a 500 milliliters Rose, and a 6-pack of 12 ounces cans, and everything settled nicely without the cramped feeling you sometimes get in narrow single-zone models. One of the biggest concerns I've heard from people who live in apartments is noise. The Yeego uses what the manufacturer calls a high-tech powerful compressor. In practice, the unit runs at a low hum that's barely audible from across the room, even when both zones are actively cooling. I left it on in my kitchen while cooking a dinner party, and the only time I noticed it was when the door opened, which caused a brief, gentle click. For anyone with an open concept layout, that's a relief. You won't be forced to hide the fridge behind a cabinet just to keep the sound down. Temperature control is another area where many dual-zone coolers stumble. Some units rely on a single thermostat that swings between zones, causing temperature bleed over when you open one door. The Yeego, however, offers independent digital panels on each side, letting you set a specific range for wine and a different range for cans or beer. After a few days of trial, the wine side stayed steady at 57 F while the beverage side hovered around 40 F, even after I pulled out a 6-pack of cold beers for a tasting. That consistency is critical if you're a serious wine lover who wants to avoid premature aging, or a craft beer aficionado who prefers a crisp pour. Now, no product is perfect, and the Yeego has a few practical drawbacks that matter once it's in your home. The first is the door swing. The anti-UV glass door opens outward, which is great for showing off the bottles, but it does require a clear space of at least a few inches in front of the unit. If you plan to install it under a narrow countertop or next to a wall, you'll need to be sure there's enough clearance, otherwise the door will hit the cabinets or a backsplash. The second trade-off is the interior layout. While 20 bottles sounds generous, the bottle racks are fixed, so you can't adjust them for unusually tall bottles like Magnum formats. If you frequently collect large format wines, you'll end up using only part of the available capacity. Lastly, the unit draws about 120 watts when running, which is modest but still something to factor in if you're watching your electricity bill closely. The cost isn't prohibitive, but it's not negligible either. Who should consider buying the Yeego? If you're a casual entertainer who enjoys a glass of red, a chilled white, and a craft beer on a regular basis, this cooler hits a sweet spot. The dual-zone design eliminates the need for